time is 7 p.m. We are called to order. Would all rise for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up, approval of the agenda. Everybody has a copy of the agenda before them. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The agenda is approved. Approval of the minutes. The minutes begin on page 6 of your packet. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes as distributed? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The minutes are approved. First up on our agenda, we have a public hearing for Tax Increment Financing District 1-20 amendment, and we have Shannon Sweeney here to give us some information on that. All right, we're going to open the hearing at 7:02 p.m.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. Purpose of the public hearing is to receive public comment with regard to a modification to our existing tax increment financing district number 1-20. That's in the Traverse Green subdivision. It's a housing tax increment district that allows us to capture new property taxes from qualified housing development and redirect those property taxes for specific purposes. Mostly we pay for infrastructure. We use that to fund and decrease the cost of single family lots, as well as provide some opportunities for rental housing as well. To be qualified housing, it would have to meet income restrictions associated with owner occupied or rental housing, and we'll talk a little bit later about those restrictions that we're looking to impose on a developer that's intending to expand a rental housing project. But ultimately, the TIF plan itself, the main components of that document are a budget that's established that talks about the public costs that we can use tax increments to pay for, and it has a map that provides boundaries from within which we capture those new property taxes and redirect them for a specific purpose. What we're modifying in this TIF plan is the budget. We created the original TIF district, I think in 2016 is when we created it, for the purpose of initiating the Traverse Green subdivision project. Over the course of the last several years, I don't know that it's developed in quite the same pattern. You always try to guess how it's going to develop, and you usually guess wrong, but ultimately we're seeing some pretty significant success in providing some rental housing opportunities. And ultimately, in reviewing the budget for the existing TIF district, I made the recommendation that we modify it in order to accommodate the project that's before you later this evening, as well as the continued development of that subdivision. Modifying the budget doesn't obligate you to do anything. Those obligations occur when you issue bonds or enter into a pay-as-you-go contract to reimburse a specific developer. The TIF plan is a tool or a mechanism for providing a subsidy for housing projects, but the only obligation that gets incurred is something that comes before this council separately in the form of usually a development contract of some sort. It does provide for the capture of property taxes, and that capture right now is mostly being directed towards paying off financing that was, or bonds that were issued to fund the public improvements that serve that area. Again, the modification that we're making or proposing to make this evening, you'll be asked to act on a resolution later in the agenda, is ultimately to increase the budget within the tax increment plan to accommodate development that's gotten more expensive over time. And so happy to answer questions with regard to what we've modified within the plan, as well as the requested action later. So,
do you have anything to add, Todd?
No, I don't.
We will take up any questions under item D in new business, so thanks very much. Now would be the time, if there's any members of the public that wish to make a comment, now would be the time to do so.
If I can, under this provision, as you may be aware, as a part of the tax increment district, we make sure the other taxing jurisdictions are aware of this, and we will receive no comment from either the school district or the county on this matter.
All right. Well, seeing nobody wishing to make comment, we're going to close the public hearing at 7:05. And once again, this is going to come up later under item D in new business. Next item on the agenda, visitor comment. If there are any visitors who'd like to make comments on any agenda items, now would be the time to do so. Seeing none, general visitor comments on any matter whatsoever. Again, hearing none, we're going to move on to the approval of consent agenda. The consent agenda begins on page 10 of your packet and concludes with the resolution on page 34 and includes the following budgeted purchases in excess of $10,000. Construction and Tree Services LLC for the rental of trommel, screener, and stacker for 2 weeks. PAPI, replacement of 4 HVAC drivers. Schmidt Concrete for citywide concrete work. The amounts are listed in the packet on page 34. The following employee appointments for regular and seasonal employment. You will note there was one name omitted, Alan Erickson, seasonal public works employee for $13.50. That was listed on page 15 of the packet. All the other names and amounts are listed on page 34 of the packet. The following business license applications will be approved contingent upon the payment of licensing fees in compliance with all city code resolution, a temporary soft drink license for the St. Peter Police Department, temporary gambling for St. Peter Ambassadors, temporary on-sale liquor for St. Peter Lions, consumption and display permit for Nicollet County Agricultural Society, and the schedule of disbursements for April 21st, 2020 through May 4th, 2020. Are there any questions about the consent agenda? Emily?
I think mine's probably for Pete. I had a question about the compost material and just a little bit more information about the process for the composting, if you know anything about that. And yeah, I'd love to hear about that.
Yeah, part of our normal process out there is to collect the materials, put it in windrows, turn it periodically out there, and then every 2 years we rent a screener and we pile the material up until we use it at the Public Works facility. We haul it into the dump site there and collection site and use it from that point of view. So every couple of years is when that material is aged to the point where we can put it in a pile so that it can then sit for another year and then we'll use it.
Cool, that sounds good.
Yep.
Just curious, I've heard a couple of comments about there being, weeds that come along with that, but is that
Yep.
just pretty normal?
Yeah.
That kind of,
It's everything that goes into the pile comes back out. So you'll see a variety of weeds and everything else.
Sure.
It's not screened to the level of a fine dirt. It's mostly for large chunks. We break down most of the material to usable.
sure. Thank you, Pete.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Any other questions regarding the consent agenda? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Sharpstra.
Aye.
Councilmember Blumenthal.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Rand.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. We have no unfinished business before us. Today, the first piece of new business is adoption of a resolution approving fire station project bids.
So, Mayor members, if you don't mind, I'll have a couple of gentlemen come up to the desk and allow them to introduce themselves in just a minute. I know you all met them before, but I'll let them introduce themselves for the community who might be watching here in the future. The overall goal of this agenda item is to put you in a position to accept or reject certain bids that you have reviewed extensively as a part of your workshop that were opened on April 14th for the fire station project. The resolution provides for acceptance of certain bids. In most instances, it's the low bidder. In a couple of instances, it's not, and we're asking you to reject bids due to a bidding issue or problem, and our friends here from RW will go through that just a little bit. In addition, we have some areas that we are we are rejecting bids, and we are going to plan to use your purchasing policy to purchase the goods or materials to make the project go forward under your regular purchasing policy. I'd like to talk about funding, but I'll save that until they go through bids just for a little bit. Once you accept bids, technically what this does is recommending to R.W. Karlstrom who you want, because they are a construction manager at risk, and so technically they have the contracts with the subcontractor, and you have one master contract with them into the future. So there's a little bit of work that needs to be done yet to make all this move forward. Again, my hope is that Jeremy and Dan here will talk a little bit about the bid process, so that the community knows how you did that and the work that went into trying to ensure local bidders as well. And then I'll talk a little bit about the funding, hopefully, if you'll allow me, before you take action, because I think it's important not just to know where you're spending money, but where the revenue is coming from. And so there's a little bit of discussion that might be worthwhile for not only you to revisit, but for the community to hear about. So with that, I'll let Jeremy and Dan introduce themselves, and they're going to really go through the information that you saw at your workshop, and I'm going to flip to the right page. That page, well, it looks like this. It is page 39, and so they're going to work down this one. It might be a little bit harder to see on color here, but they'll explain that just a little bit as well. So gentlemen, I'll let you talk a little bit, and we'll try and get to the end.
Sure.
All right.
Dan Thompson, Project Manager, Estimator with R.W. Karlstrom.
Jeremy Hetlevid, Project Manager with R.W. Karlstrom. So just, I guess we'll go through kind of a summary of the process and then the bids kind of in the categories that Todd mentioned there. But we took bids for the project back on April 14th, so we're approaching about a month ago now. And in the time since then, we've been just spending our time reviewing, vetting out bids, making sure that our low bids are complete and scope coverage was adequate for what we asked them to include in their bids. So within the spreadsheet that you were given, I'll kind of start with maybe the three different color-coded categories. We have yellow, the ones you see on the top. There were, I think we had 40 bid packages, so that's the way we packaged the individual scopes. Of those 40, there was 5 sections that we didn't receive any bids on. So most of the ones that you'll see in yellow in your packet are bids that there was no scope, and those kind of fall into the category that Todd said that you'll use your purchasing, power for just buying those. They're all small scope items that are, probably 15 to 20,000, that kind of the range of the value of those. And so that's kind of what the yellow ones are. I think there's 5 to 8 of those within your spreadsheet. The lion's share of what you see in green are just the ones that we're recommending for approval. They were the low bids for those individual sections, and we've gone through and validated those scopes. So we think anything that is highlighted in green, I see it's not showing up very well up there. But,
Yeah, it's not perfectly nice and green, but I'll kind of highlight it with my cursor.
Yeah, but essentially it would be the top one in the list there of any of those categories are green. So those are ones that we feel are complete. They were the low bid, and we're recommending approval of those sections. And then at the bottom of the 3 pages are some sections that we're recommending rejection, and I've kind of got 3 different categories that those fall into. There were 3 bids. One was for fencing, one was for flagpole, and one was the kitchen appliances. And we're asking that you reject those just because they don't coincide with what we think the value of those scopes are. Again, 2 of them are fairly small scopes that we think you can go out on your own and purchase those for a decent price that doesn't really align with what the bid was. And the third one there, the kitchen equipment, is something that the city would be purchasing as an FF&E item anyway, so that's not going to fall under our scope. So that's kind of the reason for rejecting the kitchen appliance bid. The second category of the rejection would be, we had 2 bidders that made bidding errors, and the day after the bid, they came to us and alerted us to their mistake, requested that their bid be withdrawn. Todd and our company kind of worked through our options with that, and in the end, I think based on what we found out, we feel that the best thing to do is just to grant that permission to withdraw those bids due to their error. We don't feel that awarding a bid to somebody with fairly severe errors would be a good idea to move forward with them. And then there are two sections related to the doors on the apparatus bay that we want to reject because we're actually going to recommend re-bidding that package. The one section regarding to the sectional doors, we only had one bid. We think there was some reasons for that in the architectural specifications. It was kind of narrowed down into only a certain vendor, which didn't allow other bidders to bid. So we think by opening that spec up, we'll be able to get you more bids, more competitive bids. And then there was an alternate for those same openings for a four-fold door where we want to consider an alternate product that again will probably give you potentially better value and more options to consider before awarding those two packages. So those are kind of the things you see in red are the different reasons for rejection on those packages. And then I think the last thing to highlight within the bids was we had 8 different alternates that were a part of the bidding process. Per our meetings, we're recommending moving ahead with alternates 1, 2, and 8. Alternate 1 is adding a 6th bay on the apparatus bay. Alternate 2 is adding a snow melt apron on the east and west side of the apparatus bay to melt snow without having to do snow removal. And then alternate 8 was a option to change the water heaters in the building from a gas-fired to an electric water heater. And then alternates 3 through 7, I'll just kind of give you what those were. Those are the ones that probably don't fit within the budget and aren't being recommended to accept. Alternate 3 and 4 were changing bituminous pavement to concrete pavement on either the east and west side of the apparatus bay. Alternate 5 and 6 were essentially just finish upgrades within the office portion of the building. And alternate 7 was a rooftop air handling unit equipment screen to kind of screen the equipment from the street. So that's kind of the overall review of the bids that we recommend approving, rejecting, and then the ones that essentially are just we've got a placeholder in there because we didn't get bids on the ones in yellow. So.
Thank you very much. Do you have anything to add regarding that, Todd?
Are there any questions for these gentlemen? We won't kind of let them go yet because we'll show you on page 38 the overall summary, and so there's some questions related to that. But there are any questions about the bid process, how we came to the recommendations that are in front of you, anything that we missed from your really good, extensive discussion at your workshop just a week ago?
Any questions?
The next item then I'll show you, which is a part of this, includes information on page 38. And so this is some of the R.W. Karlstrom's information connected with some of your information as well, so to make this a good size. So you see on the top of this screen, which is on page 38, the owner items that we already have in place and a subtotal for that. It includes soil boardings that you already did, FF&E, or what we call equipment. That includes the information related to or estimates related to the kitchen equipment that Jeremy spoke about a little bit earlier. The land price that you paid, a little bit of an additional budget for legal fees. It also includes the numbers, and so these are R.W. Karlstrom's numbers plus those estimates on those things we didn't get bids in. So this kind of gives you a nice complete package of what it takes. The additional bay cost, as Jeremy described, that first alternate. The second alternate, the snow melt on the front and the rear apron, is $70,000 in those electric water heaters. We did some rechecking on the additional engineering, which was included in Jeremy's scope, and so that was removed from this line item. This also includes the architectural, based on the bid amounts, estimates, money, and the contract that you have with 5 Bugles. That's that $656,000, and then a contingency of $200,000. So that gets your total expense listed out at $10.3 million. Less the sales tax. As you recall, you got special legislation to really get a sales tax rebate on paying sales tax on some of the materials. So that's estimated at $405,000. I'll skip kind of the next line because I'll explain that a little bit more. And then we have an estimated sale price of the current fire station property. This is based, it's a little bit less than what the county estimates the value of that parcel at. So what this is telling you is that you are slightly over budget, about $439,000 over budget. As we discussed on Monday, the plan for that would be that is you would either use general fund reserve dollars that you have or potentially ARP funding that you have, both of which you have within your coffers already. You already have those resources. But the final determination on the ratio, at least from my perspective and what I was trying to indicate on Monday night, is that it's my recommendation that you not make a decision on that until we get to the end and have really the final numbers, and then we'll come back with our recommendation. But you certainly are in very good shape, and I'll tell you, based on the conversation that I've had with other communities that are working on sales tax projects as well. You're in really good shape to the vast majority of those, and I think we should continue to be happy about where you are relative to budget, scope of work, and where you are at within the project. So I feel good about that. I'm hopeful that you feel good about that. So again, the need for funds is approximately $439,000 and would be one or the other or a combination of those general funds or ARP resources as you discussed on Monday. Other information that you might want to know is the resolution, which is a few pages later. I just jumped past it. Sorry about that.
42.
Yeah, thank you for page 42. And this articulates all of the scopes that we are recommending, and then at the end you'll see the ones that we are recommending for rejection, just to make sure it's all tied up nice and in a bow as best as we can at this point. So again, we'd stand for any questions that you might have, but the recommendation is to approve that resolution that's on page 42. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, it is not very often that you build a fire station. This is kind of historic, not that, well, everything you do is kind of historic stuff, but this is kind of a big and very noticeable one. So that shouldn't be lost on you as council members. It's certainly not lost on staff or your construction managers, or I think on the community. A lot of work has gone onto it this far. One other thing I'll mention, because it's probably one of the top 5 questions I get, and so we're really going to put the construction managers and quiz them really hard. We're probably going to start about when and finish about when.
Sure. I think the schedule that we've created as of now would be kind of an August start, and then being done, essentially about June next year. So we've got about a 10-month timeline. When we start and how the winter treats us, that kind of thing will affect that to some degree, but we've got kind of a 10-month schedule, and we're hoping to start later this summer. So.
And the last one I'll mention, because I haven't got questions yet, but I know I will get questions as soon as construction starts. What's kind of that work going on at the corner of Sunrise and Broadway? Well, that's where the new fire station is going to go. For some reason, I always hear questions after it starts, but we want to make sure people understand the location that's been purchased and been chosen for that. So.
And not totally related, but related by proximity, the roundabout. What's the timeline and expectations regarding that?
So Pete and his team, excuse me, continue to work on that, and so the goal is to still do that this summer. I'm hoping Pete's nodding. Yeah, so that's our goal. We have grant funds and other resources that are already allocated to that, and Pete's team has been doing great on making sure that we can acquire the really teeny slivers on the couple of public property and the cemetery property. So I think we're feeling in good shape on that as well.
Were we able to kind of work through those minor financial hurdles that we had working with the county?
So that is not finalized yet, but Pete and his team have had a number of meetings with the county engineer, and so we're feeling good about where that's at, and that's going to work out just fine, we believe.
Any other questions?
I was just going to throw in one other just informational thing.
Please.
I should have said when we talked about, there's one section that we talked about rebidding related to the doors, and with your approval tonight, we've kind of got things teed up so that next week that would go back out to bid, those bid sections. So by the time you're meeting again in June, we should have the numbers for that section for you to kind of have the complete package. So just wanted to give you that information too. So.
Well, thank you so much for being here tonight and all the work you've done behind the scenes to get us this far. The resolution before us begins on page 42 of the packet. It's a resolution directing construction manager at risk to enter into contracts with low bidders for the 2020 fire station project. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Would you call the roll, please, Barb?
Councilmember Rutherford.
Aye.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstra.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Thank you so much.
Thanks, gentlemen. We'll see you around the block for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up under new business, adoption of a resolution approving interim financing for the fire station project, and that starts on page 46 of the packet.
So Shannon is here to talk about that, just so that I can offer some additional context using some of the language that we've used before. This is the part where we've talked about that USDA is kind of your final mortgage. This is the part that's kind of the construction loan stuff, if you think about it and how a new house is constructed and how you finance that. So Shannon takes care of that work for us. So Shannon, thanks for doing that and being with us.
You're welcome. It's a bit of a unique position because I would say 99% of the projects that we work on, we're fixing the financing after we get construction bids. And I would tell you now is not a great time to fix long-term financing interest rates, as you probably are aware. And so a few years ago, a very wise decision was made to pursue a USDA community facilities loan that fixes the long-term financing, 40-year term on the loan at 2.25%. So the vast majority of our interest cost is fixed at a very low rate. That's the good news. Bad news is we need construction financing for a brief period of time, roughly 10-month construction period. By the time we're done talking to USDA Rural Development, it'll probably take 4 or 5 more months after that, that would tell you. But ultimately, USDA requires a construction loan during the financing, or during the construction period, and they will not close on their long-term financing until we are essentially complete with the project. It's standard procedure for them. I get the same looks every time I suggest we have to do construction lending. Like, why? Ultimately, USDA feels as part of their mission that if there's an opportunity for private lending to occur, they want to encourage that. And so this is that portion of the project financing. What you're being asked to do tonight is approve a resolution that provides some parameters for us to fix an interest rate as rapidly as possible. Interest rates, again, every day I look at the chart and they just do this every day. It's miserable being in my line of work right now. But ultimately, what we call a triggering resolution, or the resolution in your packet, allows us to act very quickly to make a preliminary commitment, which lenders require. They won't hold their interest rate very long in this environment, as you can imagine, but they will hold it if we have a resolution like this in place that establishes parameters and says, yes, we'll proceed to a closing. And ultimately, final documents, including award resolution, will come back before the council, but you are granting the authority to your mayor and city administrator to essentially sign that's called a bond purchase agreement, or some form of arrangement, depending on the lender, that says that, yes, we're going to move towards closing because we've met specific parameters. We've already have a placement agent that is chomping at the bit to get started and has been having conversations because we are going to hit the ground running tomorrow. So our goal is to have this stuff fixed as rapidly as possible. So our resolution does that. It establishes a maximum interest rate of 3.75%. We should be well beneath that on our temporary financing, and a not to exceed amount of $9,250,000, which is less than our $9.4 million budget that's provided by USDA Rural Development in their letter of conditions to the city. Now, we're limited in construction costs to the $9,121,000, but language beyond that provides a budget for interest and issuance expenses that can total up to the $9.4 million that I'm referencing, but we're only using a portion of that. So resolution before you provides that authority. We would intend to fix something as rapidly as we can. It'll come back before you as a final term sheet and an award resolution, probably faster than you think. So.
Anything to add to that? Or?
Shannon, just a couple of quick questions. So this is the same process that was used on the hospital project.
Yes.
It's a process that's really anticipated by USDA, so we're not doing something unusual to them or anyone else, pretty usual. A little bit unusual for us, but done often.
Yeah. I would mention that for the new members of the council, traditionally we're doing what's called a competitive sale of bonds. Meaning we're drafting an offering document, we're sending it out to the world with a credit rating saying, come and bid on our bond issue, and we create competition, which we always feel is a very good thing. In certain instances, one, in an environment of rapidly increasing interest rates, or two, when we have rate-sensitive refinance opportunities, which we did in 2019, we did several of these. We approve a resolution like this that allows us to act more quickly. When we do a competitive sale, it would be about 30 days from tonight that we would be able to take bids. To purchase the credit rating is almost a 3-week process. To prepare the offering document adds another week to that, which puts us a month out, and ultimately we're not doing anything for a month with regard to fixing rates and we want to fix it more quickly, so.
The last one that I have for Shannon is something that he talked about a little bit at the beginning, but the way this is done is it does allow local lending institutions to bid on a portion of this temporary debt. Is that right, Shannon?
That's correct. Some of them have already been contacted because Sally mentioned she had a phone call already, so.
Yeah.
But that was part of the process, is ensuring that local lenders have an opportunity to make a bid and participate. We're still creating a little bit of competition, mind you, we're just doing it in a less formal manner.
That's all that I have for Shannon. The resolution's on page 47, I believe.
Any questions for Shannon or for Todd? Daryl?
This would be about 2 years, correct?
I think we'll pay it off more quickly than that, but it's a good estimate.
To the final year contracts, and then,
If they are truly done next summer, early summer, bills will trickle in for 3 or 4 months after that, and we'll be wrangling USDA to allow us to close. So I would say more like a year and a half, but
And this allows us to pay these off before that time, as soon as USDA comes in.
yes.
this goes away once USDA comes in. They
That's
pay-
correct.
They pay this off and it's gone.
Yep, at closing on the USDA loan, it's 100% paying off whatever we
This
have
loan,
on this
it's
note.
gone then.
So, yep,
That's what takes that from the 3.75 to the 2.25?
correct. And again, 3.75 is hopefully quite high. But we wanted to make sure that we would be able to act and.
You're
even-
creating a ceiling for the mayor and city
Yeah.
administrator to stay under and not sign. If it's above that, then we need to think maybe differently
Okay.
again.
Yeah.
Any other questions? All right, hearing no further questions, the resolution before us on page 47 of the packet is for approving the issuance of general obligation temporary sales tax revenue bonds subject to the approval of the mayor and city administrator and ratification by the city council. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Ramp.
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpston.
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Next up, adoption of a resolution authorizing execution of development agreement with St. Peter Investors LLC.
So I'll ask Shannon to stay for this one, although this one is mine to cover. Shannon has some additional information to cover in the next agenda item, but they're certainly intertwined. What you see here, starting on page 48, with the resolution starting on page, or the agreement starting on page 50, is a development agreement with, related to the North Traverse Green subdivision. This is substantially similar to the agreement that you entered previously with this group. This is that property that Shannon talked about as a part of the Tax Increment District 1-20 modification. This document provides for the understanding of the nature of the development, what the building's gonna look like, cost to be paid by the developer, parkland dedication fee, how much the roadway they're paying, stormwater, where stuff is built, how stuff looks, all of that kind of thing. And again, this is substantially similar to the first agreement that you had. And there's a resolution that is included within your packet a little bit later after that agreement. Our goal is to have this put in place, and the developer's already signed it, but to have this put in place, and then the Tiff modification occurs, which is part of the public hearing that Shannon would cover next. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about this one. And again, this relates to that development that is off Clark Street, or what we would consider north of Clark Street, west of Nicollet Avenue, what some people call County Road 20.
Any questions?
Question for you, Todd, is this is St. Peter Land Company, but the last time they were here, that different name. Is the land owned by somebody else, the building is owned by somebody else versus the land?
It's a great question, a really great pickup, by the way. And so what happens in this instance, and this was done very similar fashion the first time, is that you're correct, this is the landowner, but ultimately the agreement will go to St. Peter Investors, who will ultimately be the owner, and that's who the tax increment finance agreement will be drawn to. And so this then is assigned to them, essentially. So we're very confident that this is the appropriate way to do it. This is how we did it last time. Your bond counsel and everyone has looked over the agreements, and we're feeling like we're in good shape.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Hearing none, the resolution before us on page 60 of the packet is a resolution entering into a development agreement for North Traverse Green Subdivision, second edition with St. Peter Land LLC. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Johnson?
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis?
Aye.
Councilmember Rand?
Aye.
Councilmember Sharstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye. The resolution is approved. Next up, adoption of a resolution approving modification to Tax Increment Financing District Number 1-20 Tiff Development Agreement. Shannon.
Mayor and members of the council, as mentioned during the public hearing, we're proposing a budget modification of Tax Increment Financing District Number 1-20 to accommodate additional activity that's occurring within the TIF district. The modification to the TIF plan doesn't obligate you to spend tax increments. That obligation has occurred through past debt issuance for the public improvements that are located there, for which we're directing tax increments, as well as some assistance to promote rental housing development. More than happy to answer questions. The resolution in your packet provides for the adoption of the modified TIF plan, as Todd mentioned earlier. Copies of this TIF plan were sent to both the county and school district a month in advance of this hearing, and we did make them aware of this public hearing and invited their participation if they cared to do so.
Any questions for Shannon or comments from you, Todd?
If I can, just to add one other item, the resolution also provides for approval of what's called the TIF development agreement. And so there's kind of two parts to this one, so I'll let Shannon talk about that second part as well.
Thank you for slowing me down. Todd's correct in that we do provide authorization at the end of this resolution for execution of the second development agreement that was in your packet with St. Peter Investors LLC. Same ownership from the first phase of the rental housing development that's occurred in the Traverse Green subdivision. This document provides 14 years of reimbursement of 90% of the property tax increments generated by their property. And so most of the new property tax that is captured in this TIF district between 2024 and the end of 2037 will be redirected in order to reimburse them for eligible expenses. Now, they are required to maintain some of those units at affordable or make them available to folks of certain income, I'll put it that way. 20% of the units have to be made available to folks, families at 50% of area median income. And so they are required to certify twice annually to the city that they are meeting that threshold. And so the subsidy, while it's helping with some development costs, is also helping maintain some affordable units, 20% of the units in this instance. The subsidies capped both in duration and amount. The amount is $1,405,922, and the duration is February 1st of 2038, which would be for the 2037 tax collection. It would expire at that time. So if their valuation came in much lower and they paid a lower property tax, they would not receive $1,405,922. They'd receive something less than that. If their valuation doubles, they still receive $1,405,922, and this agreement will expire more quickly. So it's capped both in duration and amount, whichever occurs first, to be absolutely clear. And for that, we get some additional rental housing, of which 20% of the units are maintained for folks at 50% of area median income.
I would also add that it helps pay for some of the infrastructure that we're putting in to help support this, but also supports other areas that are within the tax increment financing district, which is essentially the whole of the Traverse Green subdivision.
It is contributing towards the infrastructure, which is a good thing.
Carrie.
What type of documents are they sending for us to certify that they're meeting the agreement requirements for that income-based rental units. What sort of documents are we looking
It's
at?
the compliance certificate that's D1 on the agreement. You could certainly, it's essentially just a certificate saying that we're meeting the requirement. Most of the time, I will see that accompanied with an actual tenant income survey. And we could certainly request that. If the state auditor took an interest in this particular TIF district, they certainly might request that kind of information or that level.
Has Shannon talks about, just to add some additional information, as Shannon talks about that 20%, the 20% of the units below 50% of AMI is 13 units. And AMI for a family of 4 within St. Peter is right around $80,000-ish, give or take a little bit.
Oh, and this one, it's less than that, I bet.
Yeah, I think you're right.
It's by family size, and it usually starts around $30,000 for a single person and goes up incrementally by $3,000 to $4,000 per person added to the household. So we might be at 40-some thousand actually on these units.
Yeah, for family of 4.
Yep.
Yeah, so that's the 50% of the AMI
Yep.
number.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I
we're on the same
misunderstood what you
page.
said.
We're just talking about it from a different formula angle.
Yep.
Yeah. Emily and then Dustin.
Are they obligated to keep that after the 14 years?
No, but they are obligated to extend the duration of meeting that obligation on the existing units till this one expires. So, but nope, once the agreement expires, they're no longer obligated.
And on the first unit, the timeline was very, very similar. The dollar amount was slightly different because it was a different construction environment at that time, and so it's based on the actual costs here, but very similar.
Dustin.
That was actually virtually my exact question. If there was an obligation after 2038 to continue offering affordable housing.
No, there isn't. And it's standard practice with tax increment financing agreements. It's a cash flow subsidy. And we're providing that cash flow subsidy for a specific period of time. And the cash flow subsidy allows the developer to essentially decrease rental rates as required in order to attract folks that meet the income limits.
Daryl.
In your calculations here, you show the rates for Nicola County and the school district. Do those also come off as part of the TIF?
I'm not following your question, I'm sorry.
The city of St. Peter, your rate is 49%, your tax rate.
Oh, sure.
The county and the school district, they automatically, if the city does this, they pull the county and the school
Yes.
district's revenue also?
Yeah. But to be clear, the school district in their funding formula is generally made whole by the state of Minnesota. Ultimately, property tax base that's in a tax increment district is not included as available to the school district to levy against. And so the market value that the state considers that they're able to levy against is smaller. It's reduced by the amount that's captured in a tax increment district. And ultimately, that provides them with additional funding that they might otherwise be out if the state didn't view it in that manner. The county, just like the city, is not going to receive that property tax for as long as this TIF district is in place and paying obligations.
But does the county have to prove that, or is that?
No, we send them a letter, a copy of the TIF plan, and we invite them to this hearing, at which point they comment and say that we think this is a horrible idea, if that's what they thought.
Or send us commentary. This is something that the county has been aware of for a while because we've been working on this for a while, and it certainly is something that we've talked about at previous liaison meetings. And so, yeah, they have opportunity to comment on it.
We even send a letter to the commissioner whose district it's in, specifically describing the project and talking about what we're intending to do. And that was 45 days in advance of this hearing. So they have lots of opportunity to investigate if they have concerns.
It might be important to note that this housing tax districts can go 26 collections, or essentially 26 years. And St. Peter's had a long tradition, at least from my perspective, of cooperation with the county and the school district and really working hard to get these done well in advance of that opportunity of 26 years of collection. as Shannon said, our cap on this is 14.
Great questions. Any further questions?
I'll ask one more.
Yeah, Daryl.
Levy question. So this increment, we're basically giving back to the property, to the owner, pay for debts and things like that. How does that impact our levy? Does that reduce our like our market value? So if we levy $1 million, we still go to $1 million, or if we levy $1 million, do we get 970,000?
No, ultimately, when we create a tax increment district, the taxes paid on the property that were being paid prior to the creation of the district still go to the city, county, and school district. But it was on vacant land, so it's not a lot of money.
$2,000.
Yeah, yeah. So, but that money is still distributed in the same manner. Excess increment is also distributed in the same manner, which this district, may have some. Excess increment is, we freeze the tax rate when we create this tax increment district at the current year, which was in 2017, I believe, is when we certified the rate. And so as tax rates fluctuate, or if they go up, that increase in tax rate over the frozen rate generates some tax that's captured, but it's redistributed to the city, county, and school district. So there's some benefit received there. The city keeps 10% of the increment that they could spend on administration, other housing projects, things like that. And so even in this instance with this significant project, that 10% is going to add up to some dough that we can use to pay off existing obligations, including the bonds we have for the infrastructure that's there. Lastly, we do provide an impact statement within the TIF plan. We have to tell all the units of government, if this tax base was available, what would happen to your tax rate. Your tax rate would go down by about 3% in this instance. 3.052% is what it's estimated at. So, but the premise going into this is, one, developer wouldn't build unless we were willing to step in and provide some assistance and some incentive for him to do so. And ultimately that's, that's the main premise of tax increment financing is, but for the assistance being provided, they wouldn't do what we're asking them to do. And part of that is to maintain some units at affordable, or available to affordable, at an affordable level, so. Thank you.
Further questions? Hearing none, the resolution before us is on page 103 of the packet. It is a resolution approving the modification of tax increment financing district number 1-20 within Municipal Development District number 1 and the adoption of the modified tax increment financing development agreement relating thereto. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Pettis?
Aye.
Councilmember Ray?
Aye.
Councilmember Sherstrom?
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat?
Aye.
Mayor Noel?
Aye.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. All right.
Shannon, we still have you for one more.
We have got you for one.
Don't leave.
It's like the Shannon show.
Shannon show
Yeah, tonight, yeah, so, thanks, Shannon.
Just one more. We're looking for the adoption of a resolution authorizing reimbursement for debt related to Cullen Street development and equipment certificate purchases.
And while Shannon collects his thoughts in his seat there, I'll just mention that this is something that we've done in the past. It's a little bit unusual, but it really is tied into the multiple projects that we have going on, including the fire station. And Shannon can talk about the specifics of this or the technicalities of this, but essentially what this is a resolution that provides opportunity for you to issue debt in the next current year or in the future year, in essentially 2023, for expenses that you may incur in 2022. This is important, and I'll let Shannon explain why this is important.
It's a IRS compliance issue is what it all boils down to. Ultimately, the federal government cares about the purposes for which you issue tax-exempt bonds, because those bonds are being purchased by investors that get a tax-free advantage for the interest earnings they receive on those bonds. And so they establish limitations on the types of activities for which you borrow money and how long we can sit on that money and earn profits in environments where interest rates are higher than what they are on the underlying bond issue. But in this instance, the federal government wants to know that we've declared our intent to reimburse ourselves with tax-exempt bond proceeds if we're going to incur a capital cost more than 60 days after, or we're not going to close on a bond issue more than 60 days after incurring the capital cost. So long and the short, we have to declare our intent. It doesn't obligate you to issue bonds at a later date, but it provides a mechanism to do so should you incur these equipment certificate costs and want to reimburse yourself with the proceeds of tax-exempt bonds, which often bear a lower interest rate than any other source of financing. Part of the reason we're required to do this is in any calendar year, a city or any unit of government can't issue more than $10 million in what are called bank-qualified bonds. Bank-qualified bonds mean that our local lending institutions can't invest in the purchase of those bonds if we exceed $10 million in total issue in the calendar year. We would be there if we added up everything that we're contemplating in this year because of the temporary financing that we're pursuing for the fire station. Your long-term financing with rural development won't count against that threshold. So when we close on that loan next year, it doesn't count towards the $10 million cap. Why? Because the IRS has lots of regulations, but ultimately it doesn't count. And so we want to preserve your ability to reimburse yourself with the issuance of tax-exempt bonds. This resolution does that, but it doesn't obligate you to issue bonds, just to be clear.
Thanks, Shannon. Anything else to add, Todd, about
No.
the IRS or otherwise?
No, that's it. The resolution's on page 108, and again, it contemplates those extra things that we see coming down the pipe. We would categorize this as being, we want to keep the window open for you to have options into the future for how you finance and put projects together. And this is part of that belt and suspenders approach.
Okay, questions for, all right, Carrie.
I just had a clarification. You said something about capital costs that are incurred more than 60 days after the issuance of bonds. It says in
No.
advance of the issuance of bonds in here.
If you're, you have to have issued bonds within 60 days of incurring the cost if you intend to reimburse it without this resolution.
Okay.
With the resolution, we have a couple of years.
I see. Okay, thank you. I
Yep,
appreciate
sorry
that.
about that.
I really enjoy when you're here, Shannon, because I just even when we were talking about TIF financing, I feel like you describe this in a way that folks at home can really understand, and I always learn something. So thank you for spending a whole hour with us tonight.
You're welcome, and
Thank you.
Any other questions for Shannon? All right, well, you're almost off the hook. The resolution before us is on page 108 of the packet, a resolution declaring the official intent of the City of St. Peter to reimburse certain expenditures from the proceeds of bonds to be issued by the city. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Ram,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstown,
Aye.
Councilmember Bruflat,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Paris.
Aye.
Thanks a lot,
Thanks, Shannon.
Shannon.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. We have a resolution calling for the adoption, a resolution calling for the adoption of, or approving purchase of a portable x-ray system for Rivers Edge Hospital. And we have Paula here
Very
to
simple
talk.
tonight, hopefully for you. Mayor, council members, I am tonight coming to you for approval to purchase a Fuji FDR Go Plus portable x-ray system, which does include a 1-year warranty on parts and labor. It also includes some education for the staff for a total cost of $135,000. The reason that we're asking for a new portable x-ray system, and I'll just do a little background. So a portable is actually exactly what it sounds like. It's a machine that can be taken from the imaging department to where the patient is. So we have fixed equipment, and then this equipment would be able to travel to the emergency room, urgent care, the med-surg department, surgery, wherever it's needed. Currently, we have a Shimatsu portable x-ray, and the Shimatsu was discontinued. They stopped production in 2009. They support the products for 7 years after the production has been discontinued, so we are past that window. We can no longer get parts or get technical service on the equipment that we have. So the purchase of the Fuji would replace the Shimatsu unit that's currently not supported. Again, would be used across the facility. The staff did look at a couple of different options. All of them were included in our GPO or our group purchasing option. The first option that we looked at was the purchase of a new Fuji Go Plus, which is what we're recommending, for $135,000, which did include a $2,500 trade-in allowance for our current piece of equipment. We also considered the purchase of the same piece of equipment, which was a demo unit, for $120,000. The concern with the demo is that it has been traveled across the country in and out of trucks, in and out of hospitals, not really knowing for sure how it's been handled in all of those places. So we really felt like the new was the best option for us. And then we also did look at the Shimatsu, which would match what we have now, the same brand, but the cost on that was $140,000, which also included that trade-in of $2,500. The imaging staff were very involved in the decision. They tested out the options, and their preference was actually the Fuji model. And so we are recommending, and the hospital commission has approved and the recommendation for the purchase of the Fuji at $135,000. This would be purchased by hospital funds.
Anything to add, Todd? Or?
Mayor, members, just to remind you, and I'm just trying to think whether a purchase from the hospitals come before this council before, but there are rules, since the city owns the hospital, related to expenditures, capital expenditures of a certain level must come to the city council before they can be, before the purchase can occur. And that's why Paul is here tonight.
Daryl?
This was discussed at the hospital board and approved by the board, contingent on the city council, so they went along with the recommendation that Paul made.
That's correct.
Did,
Yep.
so.
Yep. Thank you. Any questions? Carrie?
How long do these units typically last?
That's a great question. This one, we have gotten to the point of well past where it's at. So we would anticipate 10 years at a minimum.
Thank you.
Other questions?
There's usually a question about the warranty.
I was going to say,
yep.
I had just written
So-
down, is there a warranty and a
so-
service agreement?
Correct. So after the first year, we then include that in our regular budget, and we add a service agreement, either through our biomed or through the company itself. We look at what the options are. But then it just becomes part of our budget process.
Thank you, Paula.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Hearing none, the resolution before us is on page 111 of the packet, approving purchase of a Fuji FDR Go Plus portable X-ray system for Rivers Edge Hospital and Clinic. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Sherstrom,
Aye.
Councilmember Blueflat,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Wynn.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Thanks,
Thank you.
Paula.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's see, next up, adoption of a resolution approving a request for city assistance for Gustavus Adolphus College Alumni Community Event.
Mayor members, this starts on page 112, and it includes a resolution that's just a little bit later. There are probably 5 or 6 primary things that I want you to know about this. First of all, this is something that Gustavus has done in the past at this location, and the location is going to be the First National Bank parking lot. We require them to have approval for a couple of different reasons, which I can get into if you would like, but generally, the event would be scheduled on Saturday, June 4th. They've made a request from 8 p.m. to 11:30, but your general practice has been 10 o'clock, or with exception for community-wide events, to 11 o'clock, not 11:30. And so you'll notice that the request is 11:30, but what's written in your resolution, based on previous practice of the council, is 11. And they are aware and understanding of that fact. I've had specific discussion with the alumni office about that issue. Second, I'd like to mention that generally we provide at their cost some level of security, which includes police reserve officers and police officers. As you'll note within the resolution, that is not included this time. But frankly, I don't have enough horsepower to provide that at this time. And so we're asking for Gustavus to provide their own security. They have security force at Gustavus, and so they understand that and can be aware of that. That doesn't mean we won't have police officers around, but what it does mean is that we won't have them stationed at the entrance. They'll walk through the crowd, be available if there's a problem and those types of things, but we just don't have the horsepower to provide that level of security for them, and so they are aware of that. We also are going to provide them some picnic tables, which is what we've done in the past as well. A little bit different than in the past is that they've typically taken electricity off a transformer that's located in the alley. In the alley right behind Nutters or Contents, it's kind of in that area if you're familiar with where that alley is. This time they do not need that support. They're getting electric support from First National Bank. You'll see their request on page 114, but the resolution is on page 118. And again, about 10 picnic tables. I do say use of electricity just in case. I'm not sure that they kind of have that all corralled, but right now I believe that they do have it all corralled. They're required to have the $1.5 million of insurance that we require of all community events and festivals of this time. It's also important to know that their plan here is not that just alumni can attend, so other folks from the community can attend this event as well, and that's how it kind of fits under that community event criteria. Be happy to answer any other questions that you might have, but the recommendation is to approve the resolution that starts on page 118.
Any questions for Todd? Carrie?
I think I was gonna ask why they don't use the space at Gustavus for this, but it sounds like it's intended to open this up for more folks or have a different change of scenery.
Yeah, I think there are a couple things that they've articulated to me, and they're not included within their letter, but certainly one of their goals is to provide for community access because they want to ensure that the community recognizes Gustavus and they celebrate not just Gustavus but the community. I think in addition to that, their hope continues to be that this provides an opportunity for alumni to more readily spend money in your downtown, which I know you're supportive of and certainly your downtown businesses are supportive of. And so that's why they like this. I will mention, and it's not included as a part of this resolution, but it is something that happens on the side with MRBT. They regularly schedule transit shuttle service for this activity so that as folks maybe go to a reunion meeting or a class meeting, the class of 68 or 74 or 85 or whatever it is, and they shuttle people back and forth for those activities for this downtown event. You will notice that in their request that their inclement weather plan is to have it on the Gustavus campus inside. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Other questions for Todd? Just in the spirit of transparency, I will mention that I work for Gustavus Adolphus College, but I'm not involved with the alumni office in any way. That's a different division of the college than the one I work in.
They have done this a couple of times. I'm trying to think, maybe it's 3 times or something like that in the past.
Well, hearing no further questions or discussion, the resolution is on page 118 of the packet. It is a resolution approving city assistance for Gustavus Adolphus College Alumni Community Event. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Councilmember Buchheit,
Aye.
Mayor Noel,
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis,
Aye.
Councilmember Rath,
Aye.
Councilmember Sharpstra.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Our last item of new business today is the adoption of a resolution approving a request for city assistance for Chamber of Commerce 4th of July events.
Mayor and members, we are certainly filling up your recreational dance cards for the early part of summer here, so there's opportunity for you. But I do want to mention that this one starts on page 120 with the request from the chamber on page 121 and 122 and the resolution on page 123. Again, this is substantially similar to what you've seen in previous years, but there are a couple little things that I want to mention, one of which is that as you see within the resolution under the city shall, we will provide mosquito control, but Pete's team talks with the chamber before that is done. It's ultimately their call as to whether they want to have that done. But Pete's crew is ready and able to do that, and typically that occurs very, 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 very early on the morning of the 4th as it moves forward. So I wanted to mention that as well. There are a couple things that they have in their letter of request, which are different, and I've had conversation with Ed about that. So as an example, there's a provision that asks us to establish garbage receptacles or curbies along the parade route. We do not do that, and they're very well aware of that. I think this is kind of a transfer in that the letter has been redone this year since Ed has a new administrative assistant, and so it just got worded a little bit differently. So we've clarified that, and the resolution is accurate. We don't take care of that. Your contract provides for that, but they have to schedule it and tell them where to put the curbies and all that kind of stuff. So that's an example of that. But I just wanted to be clear about how that works. We require them to have the appropriate level of insurance, that 1.5 million, and this does set up the exact same parade route that you've seen for the last decade or more here in St. Peter, outside of a COVID, well, no parade, I guess, in that instance. So again, the resolution's on page 123. I'm happy to stand for any questions that have in place. The one thing that you might want to ask, and we'd hit up Pete to provide some answers. You'll notice there's a lot of work going on in the park right now, but it's anticipated that that will be substantially completed before we get to the 4th and this event takes place, so we should be in good shape unless the weather goes crazier than it has been.
Questions for Todd or for Pete? Hearing none, the resolution before us is on page 123 of the packet. It is a resolution authorizing city assistance for the 4th of July event. Is there a motion to approve?
Well, before you all move, I do have to mention one more sales point, is that this really is the premier 4th of July event in the region. It really is, and we'll have 10,000 plus people that'll be along the parade route. And Pete's team does a great job of picking up along that parade route afterwards. And, it really is kind of a piece of Americana. Mm-hmm. It really is.
It is. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Call the roll, please, Barb.
Mayor Noel.
Aye.
Councilmember Johnson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pettis.
Aye.
Councilmember Grant.
Aye.
Councilmember Sherstrom.
Aye.
Councilmember Blumenthal.
Aye.
The resolution is approved. Next up, under reports, the mayor's report, I have a police officer Memorial Day proclamation. Whereas our nation's public safety officers are heroes who risk their lives to keep our families and communities safe, and whereas law enforcement personnel are dedicated to the communities they serve, and whereas police officers must continually remain vigilant and take courageous action, and whereas police officers put their lives on line to protect ours, sometimes making the ultimate sacrifice, and whereas May 15th has been designated as Police Officers Memorial Day, and whereas the St. Peter community honors and respects the sacrifices made by our police officers and wishes to extend gratitude to each member of the law enforcement community. Now, therefore, I, Shannon A. Noel, Mayor of the City of St. Peter, Minnesota, do hereby proclaim May 15th, 2022 as Police Officer Memorial Day and May 15th through 21st, 2022 as Police Officer Memorial Week in the City of St. Peter, and hereby extend the gratitude of the St. Peter community to all St. Peter police officers for their service to our community and their commitment to protecting those they serve. That's all for me this week, Todd.
Mayor, members, I have one thing listed in my report, but actually would like to talk about 3 things just briefly, or me talk about 2 and you talk about 1. So the first one is just to remind folks that the Minnesota River Valley Transit Board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow at 2:30 here at the Community Center in the Trappers District Room. And so for those of you that are members or not, it's an important meeting in providing transit services within your community. The second one that I want to mention is just to alert folks that May 24th is a special primary election in the city of St. Peter and all throughout this congressional district. And so that's coming up relatively quickly. Folks vote at their normal locations here, which include the Armory on the north end of town and the Community Center on the south end of town. So I wanted to mention that. And the third thing that I wanted to just ask about, or allow you to talk about just for a few minutes if you are willing, is we had a very nice event last Friday for the 20th anniversary of the Community Center and the library. So I was going to say, well, if anybody wants to talk about that or provide a little bit of a reaction to that, I'd let go of the floor.
Oh, sure. Anybody here? I think many of us spent time at the event. Anybody here like to make any comments? Emily.
I just heard from a few people, even just in the couple days since then, that it was so nice. Nice to see people, nice to be out in the community, really well organized. They liked how it was set up. So I think it was a really good moment of visibility for this community center and a good celebration. So
Thanks,
thank you to all the people who made that happen.
Yeah. Anybody else?
We did hear some feedback from some of the organizations that were there who felt it was a good turnout, whether it was the Hockey Association or the volleyball or Head Start or Community Ed or whatever it was. So it was nice to really have that theme focusing on not the buildings, not necessarily what we provide or necessarily what the library provides, but that it really is a community hub, and lots of organizations use this facility and kind of call it home. So we're very fortunate for that opportunity.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, that's all I have for you for tonight.
Anybody have anything else they'd like to add? Hearing nothing, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned.
Man, you guys are doing yeoman's work tonight. There's big stuff on there. That's great stuff.